What did the Conservatives that you spoke with tell you?
They basically blame Jenni Byrne for the defeat in the last election, failing to adapt to the situation with Justin Trudeau leaving, Donald Trump arriving on the scene, and failing to grasp the change in the mood of the electorate when they did not change their platform, when they did not change their message. And also her critics say that Jenni Byrne brings the worst out of Pierre Poilievre, out of his character, out of his negativity. For her, everything is a battle, I've been told. If you don't win, you lose. And it brings out the negative tone of Pierre Poilievre that seems to be rubbing electors the wrong way. So some Conservatives say we need a change around Pierre Poilievre, around his inner circle, and it starts with Jenni Byrne. If she stays, I've been told, caucus will lose patience. It will be more difficult to support Pierre if there's a confidence vote in caucus. And it's either Pierre who shows Jenni's the door, or caucus will be ready to show Pierre the door. She's a polarizing figure in Conservative circles, and right now she is wearing the sting of the defeat.
She always has been, as has he, frankly. And as a team, they've been polarizing. But it's clear that not all Conservatives feel that way. What is the sort of the defense for keeping her on?
Well, they say we accomplished a lot. We won a lot of blue-collar riding in Labour ridings. We've got a lot of cultural vote in the 905 area around Toronto. The strategy worked. We've got the best seat count since Stephen Harper, the best popular vote since Brian Mulroney. It worked. The difference, the detractors will say, is that Brian Mulroney and Stephen Harper formed government. Pierre Poilievre did not. So critics are not swayed by this argument. And also, they seemed willing, though the critics seemed willing, though, for a while to wait until after the summer. Let Pierre reflect on the defeat, on what changes he needs to bring. Let him get elected in a by-election in Alberta that's coming up. And if there's no change in the fall, pressure would have resumed. But now, with talks of possibly having a convention for the Conservative Party earlier this fall instead of next spring, seems to change a little bit the mind of people. They feel that if there's a confidence vote by all the members in the base at this convention, it might short-circuit a possible confidence vote inside the caucus brought by the Chung Reform Act. And so they feel that it might influence the decision. So now, I think it did influence the decisions of critics to come forward as this time. And now they say the ball is in the camp of Pierre Poilievre.
All right. We're going to leave it there. Christian, thanks for this.
Cheers.
All right. Let's dig into this story a little bit more. And who better than today's power panel? James Moore is a former Conservative cabinet minister. Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP cabinet minister. Shachi Kurl is the president of Angus Reid Institute. And here with me in studio, Stevie O'Brien is a former Chief of Staff to Liberal cabinet ministers. Hello to you all. James, if I may start with you. You've worked with Jenni Byrne. What do you make of the criticism, the support, and this story emerging from caucus?
I first met Jenni Byrne back, I believe, in 1996, 1997, Reform Party youth, and I've known her for over 30 years, thereabouts. And so, I have great regard for her, the successes she's had in politics, leading national campaigns, leading leadership campaigns, and all that. I don't doubt the report and the reporting that's been done on this. I wish people would be more, transparent and honest as opposed to whispering to reporters. But look, when you have an election campaign that's disappointing in its outcome in terms of its seat count and in terms of the leader losing his own seat, people want accountability, and they want to make sure that the pathway to victory next time is clearer. And some people think that Jenni should go. I get that, but I think there's the last part of what was just said there in Christian's report about taking the summer to reflect and think about this. I think that's something that Pierre Poilievre has to do. Jenni's someone of enormous capability. She can raise an army and win leaderships and win national campaigns. And I think, the caucus and the party membership both really want accountability of what went wrong. And it's true that a lot went right. Pierre Poilievre got more votes as a percentage of people who voted in this campaign than any one of the 5 election campaigns that Stephen Harper ran in, and he won 3 of the 5. Now, unfairness is the nature of our system sometimes in terms of the seat count at the end of the day, and people have to be held accountable for that. And, Jenni should have an opportunity to explain, what happened in the campaign. And if she wants to stay on, make that case as well. But caucus members are certainly entitled to ask for accountability and transparency about what happened and what went wrong.
And Andrew, to that extent, crass political calculations can be pretty brutal in those rooms. And I guess it comes down to, can a leader who, he lost his own seat, does he have the political capital to defend his closest advisor when these kinds of charges come up in caucus?
I mean, caucus dynamics are fascinating, and they obviously vary a little bit from party to party in terms of the history and the personalities that are there. But I think one of the things that's happening here is that there are a lot of members of that caucus who are looking to see whether this becomes emblematic of Poilievre understanding he needs to change. This is not just blaming it on Jenni Byrne. If she leaves, everything's fine. Obviously, part of this is to try to put things back together with the Ford, the Doug Ford side of the party. I think it'll be interesting to hear what was made of Giovanni being left out of the caucus assignments. But there are a lot of pieces that I think people are looking at to go, did Poilievre actually get it? Did he actually understand that this, compressing of opinion into a very, very narrow straitjacket of views and messaging didn't end up resonating? And is he prepared and is he capable of changing that? That's what we'll have to see over the next few weeks. The Jenni Byrne piece is obviously the first piece that folks will be looking for. But again, this is largely about, not for those of us watching from the outside, this is about caucus management. This is about how as they start to frame up towards a leadership fight, seeing whether or not Pierre Poilievre can pivot and become the kind of leader that they think is necessary to take them forward.
Well, and Shachi, it does kind of feel like a proxy fight. They're saying it's about Jenni, but it's really about whether Pierre has the power in this moment to defend her and push on through. I mean, you crunch the numbers, 143 seats, 41% of the vote. Yeah. Normally, that would be enough to defend her and then some.
Normally, but I think in this particular case, there are a lot of caucus members who listen to that narrative and listen to that argument and say, stop gaslighting us, because of the gap between expectation. You go back to the beginning of the year, end of last year, the party was leading the Liberals by 25 to 30 percentage points in public opinion polling. And, whether or not they'll ever admit it out loud, to James's point about whispers versus coming out transparently on the record, regardless of whether prepared to admit it, there were a number of caucus members who were, in their heads, already measuring the curtains in their cabinet offices and deciding what kind of changes they might want to make to the carpet or to the decor. So you have a restive or a potentially restive caucus. And Andrew made the point about caucus management. This is about ensuring that caucus has enough to do so that they don't get restive and start talking and thinking too much about the Reform Act and start plotting and pushing. That becomes a very dangerous situation. And, Pierre Poilievre is the leader. He's going to have to wear a significant amount of this. But the intertwining at one point in both their lives personally, but also professionally, where Jenni Byrne leaves off and where Pierre Poilievre begins, that's a tongue twister, is often not entirely clear to conservative world or political watching world. So how much of Pierre Poilievre is there without Jenni Byrne and vice versa? Pierre Poilievre right now has the political capital to continue on as leader, to make the case to his caucus that he should stay. But it may be a tougher sell, especially with someone as polarizing as Byrne. She's a verb in Canadian politics. There are would-be conservative politicians out there who have been Jenni Byrned by Jenni Byrne. And I mean, I don't even mean to sound funny. It's true. And so in that situation, it's a much tougher sell to keep her on and to keep caucus on side, I think.
Stevie, how you lose battles in politics sometimes matters more than how you win the ones you win. Is there risk of escalation here, that if Poilievre digs in and tries to support her and ends up losing, that can eat into your credibility pretty badly too?
Absolutely. I think they have to consider, is it worth fighting for Jenni Byrne? Is that the hill he's going to want to die on? Totally taking a bit of a sidetrack, it's kind of like the carbon tax. Something is not working or it's divisive. Even if you believe in it, sometimes you have to let it go. Mm-hmm. And I think in this case, there's something there. So I think he's going to have to balance all that out. I mean, I would be happy to take on, if they kept her on and have another election against a Poilievre-Jenni Byrne duo in maybe 2028, because I think that they were not able to pivot and that they met the moment and they had the tone in 2024, and I'm not sure they'll be able to adjust to whatever the world looks like in 2028.
That mid-game adjustment was clearly the issue, but Christian raised the possibility of an early convention to kind of deal with the mandatory leadership issues, James. Conservative members, they vote after every election. Can the Conservatives afford a fourth leadership debate in a decade here?
Well, whether the convention's in the fall or whether it's in the spring, it actually kind of doesn't matter because the members of the party, the riding presidents, the former members of parliament who were unsuccessful, the candidates who were not successful, they're all going to converge and they're going to come together and they're going to want accountability because to run for office is a big deal. You put your name on, you put your name out there in public. You face incredible scrutiny online. It can be torturous for your family and all that. But you do it because you want to contribute to your country and you want to live a life of purpose and do something meaningful. And when you lose, it's really disappointing. It can be really hurtful. And if you lose and you think it's because of something that happened over there and you did everything right in your riding, you want people to be held accountable for that. So whether it's in the spring or whether it's this coming fall, I don't really think it matters because accountability will be demanded and expected, and the leader has to deliver that.
Andrew, in the absence of Pierre Poilievre in the House, we've seen the rise of your fellow Saskatchewanian Andrew Scheer. It's been interesting to see him return a little bit to the spotlight. What sort of tone do you think he's going to represent in the House?
Well, it's interesting to see him because in some ways this shows that they are, in fact, the Conservative caucus at least, still rallying around that kind of Reform Party persona that they have. That they are not, in fact, wanting to move to something more mainstream, more Doug Fordish. They are wanting to very much stay with that kind of Western approach. It'll be also, I think, interesting when we see what happens as Pierre Poilievre becomes a Westerner again. Once he's representing a seat in the deep rural areas of Alberta, that is, from everything we can see, and certainly I have relatives who live out there that I know about the area, that this is really very kind of a true Tory area. And I think a lot of folks who are going to be looking for him to take a stand, much more like Danielle Smith in that riding, than perhaps what Canadians in other parts of the country are looking for. So, it's possible that this ends up all working against Pierre Poilievre. That what he needs to do to retain the leadership, what he thinks he's doing there, may be successful, but it may, in fact, lead to them being locked into a position where they simply cannot win an election.
Chachi, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, but I'd like your take on the Conservative critics list, the shadow cabinet. It's a very long list of people. Jamil Jivani was left off it. I wonder what you made of that.
Well, I mean, you start with the length of that list, and ultimately it gives a whole lot of caucus members a remit, an assignment, something to do so that they're perhaps less likely to be doing other things off their own bat, which might include conspiring against the leadership of Pierre Poilievre. Interesting that Jamil Jivani was left off of that list, almost the counterbalance to the fact that Andrew Scheer is in there as party leader in the House. So on one hand, as Andrew points out, a nod to the conservative, those right conservative roots that the party isn't quite prepared to stray from. On the other hand, I think a note that, hey, we'd maybe not like to be sworn enemies with Doug Ford and the Ontario Conservatives and Ontario Conservative voters, and maybe unforced errors are not what we want to focus on at the moment. So what it does is it, I think, takes some of the temperature down, which was a significant signal and piece of feedback from Canadian voters, which is that they were prepared to look very hard at the Conservative Party. They were prepared to give them an almost mandate, but it was a lot of the tone, a lot of the messaging, and a lot of the flintiness that ultimately turned the electorate off. We know this. We've poured over these tea leaves quite a bit by now, but I think what you're seeing is some acknowledgement that, okay, yeah, we're hearing elements of it, if not the whole thing.
And yet, Stevie, I live in Toronto, and when Jamil Jivani came out slugging at Premier Ford the night of the election, it's all anybody could talk about. And I know a lot of Conservatives that were really enthused to see somebody pushing back. Does freezing him out come with consequences?
I think Sachi said, and I think this the Jenni Byrne discussion really is one about relationships. I think that her inability to connect with some people, the toxic way in which she manages some of her relationships really harmed the campaign, especially in Ontario, and especially the bad feelings between Jenni and the Ford government. And that may have been a deciding factor on who formed government federally at the end of the day. And one other thing I'd think to raise, kind of counter to that, I wonder how much of this, is it easier to hate on a woman a little bit in a campaign manager role?
Probably.
Is there an element of that we're and I'm no defender of Jenni Byrne at all, but I do wonder, the feminist in me has to raise that, I wonder if we'd be having the same conversation if she was James Byrne.
Fair. James Moore, I'm seeing a bit of a Venn diagram develop here where both of these stories, I guess, revolve around relationship, tone, messaging to the public. How important is that going to be heading into this parliamentary session?
Well, I mean, Key, just by the way, about Jamil Jivani, he will not be silenced.
No.
He didn't run for office. He didn't run for office to not fight for things. And he's an impressive intellect. He was the former head of the Manning Center, and he likes to talk about a lot of issues, and he speaks forcefully and aggressively. And the shadow cabinet list or shadow ministers were announced, but it doesn't mean that he won't have some other assignment and he won't make some other contribution either to committee or in some other way. So Jamil didn't run for office to not make noise, not try to make a difference in his own way. But look, the party has to really sort of decompress from the expectations to the reality of April 28th, going into this sort of sprint session of Parliament that'll break just before Canada Day at the end of June, and then go into the summer, and then really think about who they are, what they are, and where they want to be. And I think Andrew made the point that 2028, 2029 is 50 lifetimes in politics from now. So who knows what the issues are going to be? The NDP will have a different leader. They'll be re-energized. Who knows if Donald Trump will still be president of the United States? Unlikely so on the ballot. Mark Carney will have accumulated some, a record that'll cause some opportunity for distinction between him and the Conservative alternative to govern. So, if any one of those three things that I said are true, and I think all three of them will be true, then the electoral outcome next time could be dramatically different without the Conservatives getting that much more support. The question is, does Pierre hold on to his 41%? Does he earn the right to govern Canada by showing that he can govern the Conservative caucus and govern the Conservative Party effectively? People don't trust you to govern the country if you don't demonstrate that you can govern the party and the caucus really well. So that's his first test. Stephen Harper faced the same thing when he was unsuccessful after 2004. He showed leadership, rallied the party together, went into 2006 and won. So that's Pierre's challenge. And, Jenni Byrne today is the story, but it'll be an ongoing challenge until he re-cements his leadership at a party vote and then moves forward from there.
Quite literally, as James was saying, Jamil Jivani is not going to go away and he's going to continue work. It moves across my desk that he's just launched a petition to end the temporary foreign worker program. So he's clearly sticking with it. Andrew, last word to you on this before we're going to take a break.
Well, let me just say about Jivani. I mean, one of the other things that was fascinating was that he was on this show just immediately after the election saying, one of the problems with the Conservative Party and with Pierre Poilievre's leadership is he didn't show kind of a more fulsome view of what there was. Jivani seems like he thinks that he can be a leader. And I think that this is also playing into the caucus dynamics. Is he, putting himself forward as, look, stick with the message, we just need a better spokesperson for it. Does he start to kind of build and foment, a ground force around that? I think this is really going to be interesting to watch where the Conservatives land on this and just how that dynamic plays out within the party, within the caucus, and obviously as the rest of us are watching from the sidelines.